Hi. This is the Waldorf M, an 8-voice, 4-timbre hybrid synth with digital wavetables from Waldorf's Classics and an analog filter. While M is a new synth for 2021, it's not designed to be the most feature-packed wavetable synth. Rather, it focuses on developing and extending the ideas in the original microwaves 1, 2, and XT as their successor or modern reincarnation. In this video, I'll take a look at what makes it special, dive deep into how it works and how it compares to Iridium, and look at its pros and cons. Before I start, a quick disclosure: Waldorf sent M over for review, but as always, they have no say over the content of this video. This channel is funded by viewers who subscribe to my content and book updates on Patreon, YouTube Premium and ads, and price check affiliate links in the description, which help the channel regardless of the product you choose to buy. Okay, let's start with an overview. The Waldorf M isn't cheap, so it's important to understand what it does and who it's for. Unlike Iridium, which I'll compare it to later, the M is the good old days Mark III, meaning the result of taking Waldorf's PPG and microwave heritage and running with it, as opposed to packaging every feature possible in a box. Not that plenty of features is a bad thing, on the contrary, but if you're looking for a feature-packed synth, this isn't it. M has a different focus. So what do you get with M? It's an 8-voice synth, with Waldorf already announcing that they'll make an 8-voice expansion available, so potentially you'll be able to bring it up to 16 voices at a cost, of course. Even though it has a relatively low voice count, it can play up to 4 stereo timbres simultaneously. So, for example, I used these 3 in the intro to this video, all playing simultaneously, and I could have added a 4th one if I wanted, as long as I used up to 8 voices in total. Now, I use the keyboard split here, but you can create keyboard splits in the multis over here, as well as layer timbres, again at the expense of voice count, of course. Each of the 8 voices has 2 wavetable oscillators, each capable of playing a different wavetable, with 2 different tone options: Microwave 1 with 8-bit wavetables and Microwave 2 with cleaner 16-bit wavetables. We'll take a listen to both in a bit. The wavetables can be any one of 96 factory wavetables or 32 user wavetables with 64 waveforms in each wavetable. A brief wavetable synthesis primer. Here, for example, we're using the resonant wavetable, and I can scroll through the different waveforms in this wavetable, or modulate this. And if I were to move over to a different wavetable using the outer black ring, I'd get a very different set of waveforms, again, that I could either modulate or scroll through manually. As of the current version of the firmware, M doesn't support interpolation between different waveforms in a table. So if I have waveforms that are very different from each other, then it will skip between them. But if a wavetable has a set of waveforms that are only slightly different from each other for every step in the wavetable, then transitions can be smooth even if there's no interpolation. Anyway, back to the voice structure. These 2 wavetable oscillators are then brought into a mixer, where they can be mixed alongside with noise and ring mod. These 4 sources then are passed on to a digital multi-mode filter in the mixer, either low pass, band pass, or high pass, 12 dB per octave. And then all that digital output is passed on to the VCF, a 24 dB per octave low pass filter. Then that's passed on to the VCA, which does have panning, but no other effects. I think the M pairs very well with a stereo chorus. In the intro, I paired it with the tile chorus, as well as a reverb. So the Waldorf M is definitely a bring your own effects synth, without chorus reverb and with In terms of modulation, M has at least 3 LFOs. LFO1 and LFO2 are per voice LFOs, with a third global LFO that shares LFO2's settings but can be tempo synced, unlike the other two. I say at least 3 LFOs because there are 4 other envelopes, 2 of which can be set to loop: the wave envelope, the 8-stage wave envelope, the 4-stage free envelope. Both of these can be looped. Then you've got 2 additional envelopes, the VCF ADSR envelope and VCA ADSR envelope. There's actually a 5th simple attack decay envelope in LFO1 that can be used to both fade LFO1 in and out, as well as a mod source for any other destination. The M doesn't have a sequencer, but it does have an arpeggiator with rhythmic patterns that can be applied to one of the 4 timbres. M comes with plenty of presets, 8 banks of 128 presets each, and there are 8 additional user banks that are empty. You can also store 128 multis. That's the multi-timbral arrangements. Each such arrangement, like I mentioned earlier, references 4 presets that are stored in the preset banks. The overall workflow, aside from the knobs on the panel, obviously, is tab or paged based. So you select the tab for what you want to edit, say the oscillator, the wavetables in the oscillator, mixer, VCF, VCA, LFOs, envelopes, and arpeggiator. Anyway, once you've selected a tab, you can then page through the different pages in that tab. You see the topic up here, and each page in a tab has up to 4 parameters that you control with these 4 encoders. Pressing the encoder resets the value. The overall build feels very solid with a metal enclosure and great feeling knobs and encoders. Nothing here feels cheap. The screen is LCD, not OLED, but viewing angles are fairly good. This isn't a touch screen, and if you lay M flat on a desk and add a keyboard in front, the screen is actually quite far, so preferably you'll want to prop it up on a stand like I did here. Like Iridium, it also has a VESA mount in the back, so you can put it on a stand and move it around that way. On the back, and nicely labeled here, are headphone outputs, 1/4 inch stereo, main outputs left and right, 1/4 inch, and then 4 additional auxiliary outputs. These are single 1/4 inch TRS outputs, so they're in stereo, but you'll need a TRS to TS adapter to use them in stereo. Then you've got MIDI in, out, and through, USB for MIDI, and an SD card for loading up user wavetables and backing up patches. Let's take a deeper look at a few of the components of the M. Yeah, it can be addicting to scroll through these presets. Anyway, let's dive deeper into the different components. The oscillators can be in one of 2 modes, microwave 1 or microwave 2. You can hear the differences between them if you have headphones on or good speakers, or see them on the scope. Look at all those extra harmonics. This should be a sine wave, right, with no harmonics. Microwave 2 is cleaner on the low end. Let's scroll through a wavetable on microwave 1. I set the mod wheel here to go through the wavetable. And microwave 2. Let's maybe try a different wavetable. That was 2. 1, 2. Now there are a few more differences between mode 1, microwave 1, and microwave 2. Microwave 1 gives us the ASIC bug. We'll listen to that in a bit. And microwave 2 gives us both ring mod and oscillator sync. Let's listen to sync using oscillator 2. Transpose it without sync and transpose with sync. So a very digital oscillator sync there. And I already mentioned the ring mod for more metallic timbres. A final word about the factory wavetables. Let's say bring back oscillator 1. So as I scan through the wavetables, you'll see they go up to 60. And then 61 is a triangle, 62 is a square, and 63 is a saw. Now, while it's nice to have these basic shapes accessible, it's a bit odd to have them at the end of the wavetable, because if you modulate the wavetable position beyond waveform 60, it'll abruptly change into these basic wave shapes. So you just need to be careful as you modulate wavetable position not to reach the edge of the wavetable. I asked the EMS engineer about this, and he said they're actually considering an option to limit wavetable position modulation, so that doesn't happen. But for now, you'll just need to be careful with your mod depths. All right, let's move on from the oscillators to the mixer. If you increase oscillator level beyond 70%, they'll start to get their head chopped off with nice harmonic distortion into the filter. And you can monitor levels here on the mixer. And the ASIC bug that I mentioned earlier, which is only applicable in microwave 1 mode, sounds something like this. So let's get into the oscillators and then page down to ASIC bug. Turn that on, maybe turn levels down a bit. So these are our nice oscillators. And if we go ahead and look at the mixer, and increase levels, yeah, that starts to happen, which can be harsh. But yeah, I think opens up the M timbrally quite a bit. So let's keep that for a bit and talk about the filters. Before we head out to the analog filter, there's a simple digital multi-mode filter in the mixer. It's got basic functionality. You can turn it on, and for some reason it starts at cutoff 0. That's the low pass filter. Maybe we'll cut out with the ASIC bug. Okay. So a low pass filter, 12 dB per octave with resonance, doesn't self-oscillate. Signal levels do drop when you increase resonance. And it also has a band pass mode and a high pass mode. So that's the digital filter. And then let's move on to the analog filter. So this is our chosen raw tone, and filter is a 24 dB per octave analog low-pass filter with resonance that does self-oscillate. You can play the filter if you want. I'll lower the oscillator levels. It does self-oscillate. And if I turn up key tracking, you've got a playable filter. If the filters do get out of tune, you can quickly calibrate them. Then moving down the signal chain, at the end we've got a VCA. The entire signal chain is mono up until the VCA. And you can modulate panning at the very end. So the signal chain is stereo from the VCA and out. Speaking of all these modulation options, let's talk about modulation on the M. Unlike many synths which have a mod matrix, mod assignments on the M are centered around the destination, similar to how you'd use the panel. So if you're looking at the filter, you can adjust envelope amount, the filter envelope amount, velocity, key tracking, wavetable envelope amount. All of these are things you adjust next to the destination. Same goes for any additional parameters. You find the parameter that you want to modulate using the tabs and the pages, and then edit its mod source, mod depth or amount, and sometimes controller using these encoders here. So let's, for example, start an init preset, go into the waveform mod tab. Let's say that I wanted to modulate wavetable position. So I could use the wavetable envelope and set a positive or negative mod depth here. But let's say that I wanted to use an LFO to modulate the wavetable position. I've got an LFO without a controller over here and an LFO with a controller here. So I need to find the page that relates to wave oscillator 1 and the mod 2, that's this guy here, and increase the mod depth or amount of LFO 1. And you can see how I'm impacting this part of the modulation layout for oscillator 1. Let's zero this out. If I wanted to use a controller, I'd use this page, which has a controller in the middle. So if I'd set a mod amount, nothing would happen because my controller is the mod wheel. And now I've got that set up. The distortion you just heard, by the way, is the mod depth reaching the sawtooth waveform at the end of the wavetable. I already discussed that. It would be nice if there was a way to prevent those upper waveforms from participating in regular wavetable modulation. Anyway, so that's how modulation works within here, again, based on the destination and not as a mod matrix. It takes a while to get used to these little shortcuts here, but basically there's 3 letters that represent what we're looking at: mod 1 source, mod 1 controller, mod amount. And then, like I mentioned, some things have a controller and some don't. So that is basically modulation here. Let's take a look at what the mod sources are. Like I mentioned, you've got 3 LFOs, 2 per voice, 1 global, 4 envelopes, 2 loopable, 2 4-stage envelopes, the VCF and VCA, and then wave is an 8-stage envelope. Let's take a look at that. If we go into here, we're looking at the wave envelope, and as we change its parameters, you can see that we expand it and take a look at all 8 of its stages. So that's the wave envelope. The free envelope has 3 levels until it reaches sustain, and then a release stage. Then the VCF and VCA envelopes are pretty straightforward: attack, decay, sustain, and release envelopes. Again, connected by default to the filter and VCA. The wave envelope is connected by default to the wavetable oscillators. The free envelope isn't connected by default to anything. All of these can be assigned to any destination. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to choose a different mod source for this controllable slot. I could scroll through all these sources, the LFOs, the different envelopes, and the LFO envelope, remember the 5th envelope, and a bunch of other things, controllers, CCs, which you define in the settings, keyboard tracking velocity, aftertouch, polyphonic pressure, poly aftertouch, the global LFO, that's the 3rd LFO, which follows LFO 2, and Max just sets this at a maximum value. So in this case, the mod wheel can be the controller, and there are a bunch of controllers. So you could have an LFO control a modulation along with a random and coin flip option. Let's clean this up again, take a look at a few more modulation details. So let's take a deeper look at the wave envelope. I'll just use envelope amount here. And let's take a look at this envelope and edit it here. So it's a multi-stage envelope, I already mentioned that. Let's maybe add, set maybe level 2 to low, and then increase the 3rd time and level. Anyway, this envelope, the wave envelope, can have up to 8 stages, but it doesn't have to have all of them active. So here I've got key off point at 2. I could change that to 3 or to 4. And I could set it to loop, in which case it will loop from the loop start to the key off point. And now it's a looping envelope. If I set key off to before the loop start, then the envelope will loop once I get to the release stage. So maybe increase release here. So now looping will start once I release my finger. The free envelope is a bit different. Let's find it over here. Free envelope it can either loop as long as you hold the key, or loop both when you hold the key and during the release stage. Let's again edit the preset, take a look at the LFOs. One thing I didn't mention, you can page through the different sub pages this way, but if I wanted to swap between wave 1 and wave 2, there's a shortcut by pressing this. Anyway, I'm editing wave 1. Let's look at its mod sources, and I will increase the mod depth of LFO 1 here. So let's take a look at what the LFOs can do. This is the rate range, not very extreme. It certainly doesn't go into audio rates. Actually, the looping envelopes will go way faster than this if you need a fast LFO. And then shapes are a bit odd. Let's go into this. So you've got these basic shapes. Random is a slewed random. You don't have a sharp sample and hold. And then sample and hold uses LFO2 as the source, as opposed to the typical noise, so the result is not totally random. You can get nice rhythmic results like that. And then if you want, say for example, a sawtooth LFO, then that's not immediately accessible here. You get that using the symmetry parameter. So it goes from a descending saw to an ascending one, and all the shapes have different symmetry functions. Pulse width for the LFO, random LFO symmetry, and yeah, sample and hold doesn't, I guess. Humanize, by the way, adds a little bit of randomization. To the LFO rates. And yeah, I think those are the highlights. Obviously, you can check the manual for more details. Like I mentioned, LFO 1 has fade in and fade out options, and you can sync it across the voices or not if you like. LFO 2 doesn't have a fade in and fade out envelope, and you can choose to have it phase shifted in relation to LFO 1 if you want, which is cool. And like I mentioned, you can turn the third global LFO on. It uses LFO 2's parameters, and you can MIDI sync that to incoming clock. Moving on, M has a simple built-in arpeggiator. The default clock rate, BPM, is very slow. I asked, and I'm told they're going to fix that in an upcoming update. That's the arpeggiator. It has a few rhythmic patterns. I think 16 of these. So that's a nice touch. And yeah, there are 3 modes here. Normal one-shot goes through this pattern once, and then hold is what you'd expect. And what else? Play direction and range. Quite a massive range. And play directions. So the usual suspect options. Next up is multi-mode, which you enter by pressing this button, and it loads up the last multi you had on. This gives you 4 parts. I already showed this to you before. So part 1 on MIDI channel 1 in this case. That's what I have assigned here. You can edit the multi-map by hitting Shift and Map. Hopefully you can see this on screen, how many voices I've allocated to each of the multis. You move between the multis, the different parts of the multi. Like this, part 1, 2, 3, and 4. You've got a different volume for each part. Let's turn part 4 on. That's part 4. And you choose the bank and sound using these 2 encoders. MIDI channel here. You can pan the different parts and send them to the different aux outs. You can set splits and lock the VCF. You can control all the VCF of all 4 parts if you like. One little thing I wish they'd add here. Currently, if you change the knob positions as you move between the parts, and the physical position of the pots don't represent the actual position of the parameter, there's only a jump mode, so it'll jump immediately to the knob value. It would be nice if there was a catch-up or scaled catch-up mode, or even a mode where you can, I don't like that too much, but you can look for the parameter and then pick it up. But certainly scaled control would be nice for all the non-encoder pots. For the encoders, it doesn't matter. Before we head out to the pros and cons, let's take a look at a few of the system menus. You enter that by pressing this button, I guess not in multi-mode. Here we go. So these are the settings using the ARP button, and you can page through a few pages here. I won't go through everything here, obviously. This is a fun one. Parameters for patch randomization. Standard settings stuff. Let's see if there's anything interesting in here. You assign different MIDI CCs to different controllers here. Remember, we use these as mod sources when we get to the destinations. So those are settings. Then operations are different things that you can do. A few pages here. Auto-tune the filters. We talked about that. And you can also import user wavetables here, as well as backup and restore presets and banks to the SD card. Importing user wavetables here is a bit tricky. I wish they'd document that a little bit better. And with that said, let's talk about alternatives and pros and cons. First, most wavetable synths are all digital, so you're definitely paying a premium with M for the 8 analog filters for the 8 voices. The biggest pro for M is that it's a Microwave Mark III. It aims to give you the best of Microwave 1 and Microwave 2 and XT's sound with a layer of modern features and a way more user-friendly interface. However, if the gritty microwave sound or analog filters aren't what is top of mind for you, other wavetable synths will tend to have more wave shaping options, interpolation, and more effects. More pros and cons in a bit. A direct comparison that I've been asked to make is to Waldorf's own Iridium. Overall, competing with Iridium is a very hard thing to do for any synth, since it has almost every synthesis method and feature you can think of. In terms of feature set, if you're working with a checklist, there's really no competition. Iridium delivers a knockout blow on almost any front. M is strictly a wavetable synth, whereas Iridium has 5 additional oscillator engines, samples, granular, FM, a resonator, and virtual analog. To top that, Iridium has 3 of these engines per voice as opposed to just 2 oscillators, which are wavetable oscillators on M. Iridium has a host of different effects and a wave shaping digiformer. I made a whole review about all this, so I won't repeat that here. But Iridium is all digital, so no analog filters. It does have quite a few filter models, though, that you can choose from. Oddly, I went through all of Iridium's filters and none of them will self-oscillate, but other than that, there are many, many models and routings to choose from. Let's briefly compare the filters and then the oscillators between these two. So, if I press track 4, I'm on M. If I press track 1, I'm on Iridium. And I'll compare the analog filter, so 24 dB per octave, already mentioned that, with resonance. Resonance does reduce levels here. Let's try and get to something similar on Iridium. Resonance doesn't reduce levels here, so I'll try to do some gain compensation later on. Now, I'm on the basic 24 dB per octave low pass filter in PPG mode here. So, close your eyes and take a listen to whether the analog premium is worth it to you. Aside from the filter models, there are different filter options here, different slopes, as well as a saturated and dirty filter. I think these veer further off, and certainly for the dirty one. But yeah, even if they're not identical, plenty more options on Iridium. Let's take a listen to the oscillators. I've got the resonant wavetable here and the resonant wavetable here. Iridium, by the way, comes with almost the same exact wavetable list as the M, and you can obviously load custom user wavetables into here as well. But as you'll hear, how they're rendered sounds quite different. So this is Iridium, very clean sine wave across the board. Let's listen to the M's version of the same exact waveform. Microwave mode 1 and microwave mode 2. Cleaner, but compared to Iridium, obviously completely different. However, Iridium has a few dirty or legacy modes. So let's see how dirty Iridium can get. This is legacy mode. You can hear the grit on the top end. And here as well, compared to microwave. Let's try harsh mode. Microwave 1. And Iridium harsh. Not too harsh. I could obviously scroll through the entire wavetable, and I've got this set up here. Yeah, a lot more dirt. Let's try, instead of harsh, let's go for dirty here. And microwave. Let's listen to this on microwave 2 versus Iridium. So I don't know if you'd call that 50% there, 70%, or 90% there. Obviously, Iridium does a lot more. So maybe even if it isn't precisely like this, maybe the effects or any one of the other numerous synthesis modes will compensate. Even though they're exactly the same size, a totally different intent behind each of these. Just to complete the picture, a few more differences between these. There's no ASIC bug mode here and no pre-filter drive per se as you increase the oscillator mix. But if we head into routing, there are plenty of routing options. The Digiformer, which is this guy here, has a bunch of settings here, including gain and drive, a bit crusher, ring mod, another filter, and many other options. So maybe it's not exactly like the ASIC bug here, but you can drive the heck out of the oscillators, and you can put this Digiformer either after the filters or before them if you want, something that you can't do here. So there's no post-filter drive here. A few other differences: Iridium has 16 voices, albeit all digital, and M has 8 voices in the default configuration. An 8-voice upgrade is said to be coming. M also has 4 separately assignable outputs for the 4 timbres. Iridium is bitimbral and doesn't have separate outputs. However, it does have CV/I/O and a USB host jack, as well as an audio input, whereas there's no audio input on the M. From a user interface perspective, M is more spaciously laid out, but that comes at the expense of direct parameter controls, and there's no big touchscreen here, obviously, as there is on Iridium, and no pads, which aren't velocity sensitive, but do offer interesting chord and sequencing options. The processor inside Iridium is clearly faster and superior to the one in M. There's better visualization of the oscillators, wavetables, and filter modulation on its screen. It's really nice to be able to see this little dot move as the envelopes progress, or same for the LFOs. The scope and spectrum analyzer here, all very useful. It would have come in handy here, especially with the waveform envelope here, to see exactly where we're at across these 8 different levels and times. In terms of modulation, Iridium has a proper mod matrix with plenty of mod sources and destinations, whereas M uses the mod destination-based system, and depending on where you buy them, M is either a bit or a lot less expensive than Iridium. So that's more or less the comparison between the two. Let's take a look at overall pros and cons for the Waldorf M. Overall, both the positive and negative thing about the M is its focus on being a continuation of the Microwave 1, 2, and XT. If you're interested in an evolution of those two synths, the M is an excellent Microwave Mark III. Its focus on being that gives its distinct gritty character, which makes it special, and it does come with an overall relatively easy to use interface. In terms of cons, I like to split this up to hardware issues and software issues. On the hardware side, probably the biggest issue that I have is that the internal processor is relatively weak. This ripples out to a few issues that come up as you use this synth. I'm not going to compare it to Iridium again, but there are no wave shaping features like you might find in other wavetable synths. There are no audio rate FM options, at least not in the current firmware. There's no interpolation between waveforms, again, at least in the current firmware. No animations or scopes, which would have been nice for the wavetables. There's a bit of flickering as you page between different items. Updates may be a bit slow. Maybe I've been spoiled by Iridium. You don't notice this, however, after you use this for a bit. In multimode, there are a bit of hiccups if you change the sound in a different part. So right now this sound is on part 1, so it makes sense that it'll cut out if I change that. But say if I go to part 2 and change the sound in part 2, that sound will also cut out a bit. So that I don't know if there's a way around that or not. I asked about this and I've been told that it might be a CPU limitation. So that's it on the hardware side. On the software side, I think it's nice that there's the simplicity of seeing all the mod sources as you scroll through the different destinations. However, it would have been nice if in parallel there was a mod matrix. So if you load up a preset and you want to investigate how it works, you literally need to go destination by destination to find out what's modulating what. Often there's a summary on screen, but not always. And you're always looking at one destination. So say if I go into wavetables, I need to scroll through these to see what's modulating what. So if you've got a complex patch, it makes it hard to see everything going on in one place. A mod matrix would help fix that. Remember, there are no effects here, so just be prepared to bring your own external effects. Some other complaints that hopefully can be addressed when you're in multi-mode. As you change preset parameters, you can't save that in the preset. You've got to exit multi-mode, change the preset, then go back into multi-mode. Multi-mode is a lot of fun, so it would be nice if there was a save all option for all 4 patches that you're using. So that's on the cons side. On the pros side, M does ooze character and grit. It's a relatively simple synth, but it has a unique sound, and the focus on wavetables invites you to explore each of them sort of like timbral journeys, as opposed to more complex synths like the Iridium, where you might get sidetracked by having so many options to play with. The built-in wavetables are classics and excellent. M has 4 timbres, both for splits and layers, which is an invitation for complex sound design, or to get an ARP going on one timbre and pads on another and a bass on another, like I showed you in the intro and outro. All that with the caveat that you have a total of 8 available voices, of course, at least until the upgrade is available. So plan your multi-timbral escapades carefully. Finally, the user interface is clear and simple, so once you get your bearings, you won't really need the manual. That's where the focus on surfing and exploring interesting wavetables and core modulation shines. You get lost in sounds rather than in menus. So that's it for Waldorf M. If you'd like a bunch of ideas on what to do with all these LFOs and envelopes, there are plenty of them in my ever-expanding book, available to the good people who support this channel on Patreon. Hit like if this was useful. Ring the YouTube bell below if you want to make sure you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching.